Welcome to In Such a Time, conversations on Jewish life, leadership, and meaning. Each week, Rabbis Jonathan Jaffe and Liora Landi explore the moments, questions, and ideas that shape who we are and who we aspire to be. And now for this week's conversation.
Welcome back to In Such a Time, conversations on Jewish life, leadership, and meaning. I'm your co-host, Rabbi Jonathan Jaffe, along with Rabbi Liora Landi. And today is a special session we're doing in timing with the Simchat Torah holiday and the opening of the cycle of the reading of the Torah. And so we thought for today, in light of the holiday, we'd maybe spend some time talking about some sections, specific psukim or specific parshiot of the Torah that speak to us, that we hold on to at this time. So I'm going to go first, right? And then we're going to go from there, and we're going to talk about some of the Torah that really speaks to us as we open up the Torah anew.
Perfect.
Great. So I don't know about you, Rabbi, but when I was ordained at Hebrew Union College, Los Angeles, we all met inside Wilshire Boulevard Temple, and there with Rabbi David Ellenson, we stood on the bima at ordination, each holding a Torah scroll. And we were asked in advance to choose a verse of the Torah that we found meaningful to us and to roll the Torah to that verse so that we would have that in our arms as we were ordained as rabbis. And I thought that was a really, it's a very meaningful ritual. Is that something, did you do anything like that?
Something similar, but it was any pasuk in the Tanakh, and we didn't hold a Torah. It was different, yeah. Different campuses, different tradition.
LA was very touchy-feely, as you can imagine the California rabbinical school to be. So I'm going to present on a pasuk, the one that I chose, and for me has always been really helpful. And my pasuk, by the way, just meaning Hebrew word for verse, is one that it really, the explication, the rabbinic take on that is more meaningful even than the verse on its own. So today I'm going to be reflecting on Deuteronomy chapter 10, verse 12, and I'll read the beginning of the Hebrew and then the English. Ve'ata Yisrael, ma Adonai Elohecha shoel mimcha. And now, Israel, what does Adonai your God require of you? But to revere Adonai your God, to walk in all God's ways, and to love God, and to serve Adonai your God with all your heart and with all your soul. Face value, fantastic verse of the Torah, wonderful framing of values and what it means to actually emulate God and try to act in the sense of B'Tselem Elohim, in the image of God. But what really stands out to me is what our rabbis do with this, and this begins in the Talmud and then in later commentary. Here, this is from Tractate Menachot 43b. It was taught, Rabbi Meir used to say, in teaching this verse, that a man is bound to say 100 blessings daily, as it is written, and now Adonai, what does Adonai your God require of you? That is that Rabbi Meir takes the word ma, meaning what, and inserts an aleph into it, so instead of ma, it's mea, meaning 100, and reads the verse to say, and now Israel, Adonai your God requires 100 from you each day. And what is that 100? 100 moments of blessing. And so really this verse from the Talmudic perspective is about gratitude. And for me, this is so much the meaning, what I glean from Jewish observance, from halakha, is that if you live a Jewishly framed life, you are constantly encountering prompts to stop what you're doing and to just be in awe of the world around you and offer deep thanks for the miracle of being alive. I'll give an example or two, that when we wake up in the morning, we're supposed to begin in the words, Modeh ani lefanecha, I'm so thankful for you, Adonai, our God, that I have risen and have a new day of life. As we get out of bed and as we stretch our bodies and as we put our clothes on, there are blessings that thank you, God, for allowing me to have access to my limbs and to be healthy enough and to be able to actually stand up. There are people this morning who awoke and they could not comfortably stand out of bed, or there are people, we're recording this on the 700th day of captivity of the hostages, who are stuck in tunnels beneath Gaza, who cannot stretch out their arms because they are confined to such a small space. And that we take all of these little, often overlooked miracles in our lives, and we say, wow, this is really important. Just thank you. So I'm wondering, in unpacking this, do you have sort of a daily gratitude routine or a way in this resonates with you in which whether Jewishly, not Jewishly, you try to take in the prompts to pause and to just give thanks for all that you're blessed on a regular basis?
That's a good question. I mean, we've had this discussion about gratitude and if it's something that's inherent or if it's something that you learn. And I think maybe it's a little bit of both. I think some people they come at it a bit easier, just they have gratitude in their heart. And I'm a little bit neurotic. And so I'm usually thinking about like what could go wrong. And over the past few years, especially since becoming a mother, I really try to take time and say, like, what in my life is good? Because there's so much that's good. And so we do Modani, or we used to do Modani. But lately, and also when I lived in Israel, it was similar. Like there's one window that I look out, always in each house I live in, there's like one window I look out and I look around and I see like what about that place is sacred every day. In Israel, there was like this little perch of a bird that I used to watch, and it was beautiful. And there were a lot of bird politics there. But now it's over my kitchen sink, there's a bunny that comes out at the same time every day.
Wow.
And I watch the bunny and I just think, wow, I've got kids running around and I have food on my table, but I also just get to check in with this bunny every day and be like, I'm alive. This bunny's alive. What a beautiful, what a beautiful thing. Like,
absolutely.
So that's how I check in as of late. And I need a little bit more gratitude though.
Your family's much more virtuous than mine. We have the woodchuck that lives, and when he comes out, there's an epithet shared in our family by which the woodchuck is. So maybe we could offer some more gratitude as well. I want to expand and talk about really thinking about this from the idea that Judaism prompts us to a life of gratitude in two different ways that I find really meaningful. The first one for me I think about is the idea of blessing our food. And that I think is something often overlooked in life, but the idea of saying a bracha before and sometimes after we eat is to say, oh my God, it's amazing that there is food in front of me. It's amazing that I have these taste buds where I can enjoy the food. It's amazing I have enough food. And in some cases, someone prepared this food with me. It's a miracle that my body is healthy and can take this food and convert it to energy. And wow, that's an amazing moment. And so if you are practicing within a halachic way, you are regularly pausing and saying, hold on, like what I'm about to do here, this is awesome. And I might just be able to stuff this pizza down my face, but like I shouldn't, because wow, that's an amazing thing. And so I honestly feel as though if you live a halachic life, it is hard not to live in a constant state of wow. And I know there's always the pull of keva versus kavanah, that's practice versus intention. But the idea of stopping and blessing when we eat is something to me that is so mindful. The second one, and this is, I'm now expanding out for a broader perspective, is just the calendar of the Jewish holidays. For me, that is all about creating a structure of time to say, wait a second, what's going on here is really important. I don't want to miss this. So we're recording this before the Chagim, and then, Sukkot. Go outside, build a little fragile hut, eat food, sleep out there, look at the stars, and just revel in the beauty of the fall. Hanukkah, it's cold, it's dark, huddle inside, eat deep fried fatty foods, play a top game, eat M&Ms, spend time with family, hug your loved ones. Wow. Tu B'Shvat, the first signs of spring are arising in Israel, and the almond tree is starting to blossom, and the days are getting lighter now. And wow, just stop in all of this. And I personally have such a propensity to just get in a cycle and just do things mindlessly, that Judaism provides for me a framing and a lens to 100 times stop each day and to say, wow, the fact that I am alive at this moment is a miracle. And it's a miracle of something I did not earn, I don't deserve, but it's God's grace that I am able to enjoy.
It's making me think about my 4-year-old who asks a lot of questions. Like he notices everything.
Mm-hmm.
And we lose that at some point in our life, like the ability to just notice and take something in for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's always a first time, even when you're much older. But I want to take that, like that bright-eyed attitude. And he likes to ask me, he's in an educational setting where he's learning about brachas. about blessings, and he goes, what's the blessing for this? What's the blessing for that? And sometimes I'm a little overwhelmed by his questions about blessings. Like, I don't know anymore. But when I can stop for a second and like think about what he's really asking, and that he's excited about that, and that he's stopping and making us all stop and kind of argue about which blessing we're going to say over the potato chips, um, that's an incredible thing to be able to do.
Right. And he's learning the prompts.
He's
and,
learning prompts.
And those prompts should over time engender an outlook of gratitude. And you're giving him the tools to do that. And something I feel as though, especially in a post-halachic community like ours, sometimes I worry that we are not teaching enough to our congregants. And to understand that within the framework of Jewish observance, it's only through the repetition and the structure that we are able to create the framing that allows us to glean that meaning.
You know, it's interesting because I think a lot of our congregants are drawn to that kind of stuff anyway, like to gratitude journals and to really being engaged in the earth and nature. And I think maybe it's on us to create that connection between, like, that natural connection that exists with Judaism. Like, all the things that you're naturally doing, like, let's put it into the Jewish framework.
Right. It has a basis. And blessing, this is the one time I'll say something I have shared with you. We've shared lots of stories of our summer camp experiences, and some good, some bad, but one that really has helped to frame and really to move me in the direction of who I am as a person was that going to Camp Vermont, California, and having an evening ritual of saying Shema Ve'ahavta every night, as one does before going to bed, and then coming home. I get this is a fourth grade, fifth grade, coming home and feeling very distant from my friends and from my camp, and keeping that ritual of Shema Ve'ahavta, and then adding to it that I had to think of 3 things for which I'm thankful for that day. And so I started this when I was probably before 15 years old, and now 30 plus, I won't imagine how many much more years later. That's something that has stuck with me, that for every day of my life. And there are even times when I'm trying to go to bed and then for some reason I'm not falling asleep, and I just realized, oh my God, I haven't done my 3 things yet, and along with my Shema Ve'ahavta. And I really do think it's had a palpable effect on me and my outlook on life, that I have not gone a day for the past 30 plus years without saying, even in the stinkiest of days, there are at least 3 things that I should be really thankful for.
I've kept diaries a lot of my life, and a lot of them are just journals of whining.
Yeah.
But which
That's
is
a good read.
Which is really something to go back and look at teenage Leora Weiner. But sometimes I remember in the journals to be grateful for things.
Yeah.
And when I go back, I'm like, oh, good for you for like noticing that thing. But since you told me that you do that every night, I've started doing that with my kids and with myself. It's important. It's a ritual that you have to get into the space of doing.
It's like an exercise. It's just like regular fitness, of just a fitness of gratitude. And maybe each have 100 times of opportunities a day just to say, like, wow. So it's really nice to record this podcast with you. Wow, that's very good.
Agreed.
Let's hear one of your texts.
So your text actually flows into my text, because I chose the pasuk from Genesis 28:16. Vayikatz Yaakov mishnato vayomer achen Adonai b'makom hazeh v'anochi lo yadati. So Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, surely Adonai is present in this place, and I did not know it. And so Jacob, who our listeners, congregants will know, is one of my favorite biblical characters, because he's so real and completely imperfect. And he goes through a whole transformation, metamorphosis in some ways, from Jacob to Israel, where he gets a new name and he takes on a new role as the father of the people of Israel. And he's in this place, and he's had this encounter at night with, we're not exactly sure what it is. Is it an angel? Is it with himself? Is it with a stranger? And he overcomes this moment, and he wakes up and he goes, I didn't know that God was in this place. And there's many ways of interpreting it. Number one is Jacob realizes that there's something holy in himself. Like, he's been plotting and scheming and trying to figure out which side of his family to save and to put on which side of the river. And he's about to encounter his brother. But then he wakes up and he's like, oh, there's something holy here. He's also in the place where his father was almost sacrificed, and he is realizing, oh, I'm in a place where something really major happened, and I need to I don't know if it's gratitude, but I need to be aware of where I am right now. And there's also a midrash that the word mishnato from his sleep is really also the root for shinui, like for change. And so he awakens from his change and something has happened inside of him. He's changed. He's like discovered a holiness, or he's discovered God, or he's in a relationship that he wasn't in before. And I think that this scene is like so indicative of like the possibility for change within each and every one of us, Like we're always able to find holiness. We're always able to discover something that we didn't know existed in somebody else, in ourselves, in our relationship with God, in our relationship with one another. And the last part of this that I think is really interesting is the Kotzker Rebbe. He says, the beginning of true piety is not so easy. You must subdue your ego, and you call yourself a liar. It could make you lonely and a little crazy. A crazy man about God. You understand me? So I had to read that a few times to actually understand him. But what he's trying to say is like Jacob's full of ego. And when Jacob is able to push down his ego a little bit, or maybe compartmentalize it or move it somewhere else, he's able to make space for another. And I think about that all the time. Like, how much space do I take up, and what am I not seeing because of my presence, or also leaning into it? I take up a certain amount of space, and like, what kind of holiness am I bringing or gaining from that? So Jacob is just, he's a metaphor for how do we come into this world, and how do we find holiness either within ourselves, within other people, with an encounter. This is very all-encompassing for me.
Yeah, absolutely. When I was working in San Francisco before coming to Chappaqua, our scholar in residence was Rabbi Lawrence Kushner, who was a real influence on me, and I had a chance to read many of his books, including one that takes its name from this very verse: God was in this place, and I did not know it. And one of the interpretations he makes, based on earlier Hasidic interpretations, is that there's an extra I. There is Anochi and there's Lo Yadati. There's me and I did not know. And you don't need the Anochi. You can just say, God is in this place and I did not know it. But that to read it in the Hasidic lens is to say God was in this place and me, my I-ness, was in this place. And it was only after I got over or removed the I that I was able to realize God was in this place. And so the ultimate goal spiritually for Rabbi Kushner's reading of this verse is that we at times need to empty ourselves of our ego, as you're saying, of our self-centeredness. And only when we create that empty vessel is there space for God to come in. And I think that's a very meaningful interpretation that dovetails very much with the way you're talking about this.
Like yadati is the Hebrew word for like knowing someone intimately, like whether it's sexually or intimately, like in your heart. And so he's also saying, like, if you use that interpretation, like, I had no intimate relationship with God. I took up too much space, and now, oh my goodness, like, God is here, holiness is here. Encountering his brother, encountering himself, encountering the space where his father was almost sacrificed. Like, he's he has an awakening, and it's meaningful that he goes through this transformation also in name, to become like something has happened in that moment that we get to witness.
And I agree with you that the character of Jacob is such a meaningful one because of how broken and imperfect he is. I remember Rabbi Kushner also teaching that there's no one in the Torah that you would want one of your kids to marry, that they're all a bunch of schnooks, and they're all stealing and lying, and Jacob perhaps is the most emblematic of all of that. But that it reminds us that that's what people are like, and that we shouldn't hold ourselves to standards beyond ourselves. I'll give one of my teachers, Rabbi Devorah Weisberg, who ran the rabbinic program at HUC Los Angeles. She used to say that, as opposed to many other scripture-bound religions, that the Torah is descriptive, not prescriptive. We don't have a perfect figure in a Jesus or Muhammad or a Buddha of what life should look like. We have a very real idea of what life actually looks like. And in the Torah, especially the book of Genesis, the families are messy. Mistakes are being made all the time. People are tripping over themselves. It is just one sort of mistake after another. And it's a reminder that that's the human condition. and that it doesn't mean that we are sinful or that fallen from grace. It just means that we're human and we're all just trying to do the best that we can.
Yeah, I mean, it gives us work to do.
Yeah.
The Torah gives us work to do. You know, you have to really pick it apart and find the meaning in it. And that's why I really like this word, like shnato, like from sleep, we're looking at it as change. Like I was asleep and then I was awakened.
Yeah.
Or I was asleep and then I was changed by whatever I was awoken to. And holiness is in like creating tikkun, not to get too much into that space right now, but like fracture needs to be fixed. And this is giving us a model for what do you do with that fracture? Like you try to make healing and wholeness and holiness out of it.
It's funny because you see it as a challenge. I see it more as a source of comfort. When we pray the Amidah, we begin with Adonai Sabbatai Tiftach, the words of King David saying, God, open my lips, the words that King David says just after realizing just how bad things have gone for him, what a mistake he's made with Bathsheba and having her husband killed after he's had an affair with her and gotten her pregnant and tried to hide it, that in opening the Amidah and our own confession, we start by saying, oh yeah, remember that King David who seems to do so great in Jewish history? He screwed up. He made real mess of his life. And it's okay. King David makes mistakes. I can make mistakes too, as long as we speak to them and do our best, as you said, to make tikkun.
I mean, maybe that goes back to gratitude, like your place.
It's natural for me,
it's
yes.
natural. Like, oh, okay, I'm comforted by this. I'm like, oh man, we have a problem. We're gonna try to fix it. We got to take this to therapy. I mean,
yeah,
Jacob's the ultimate therapy candidate.
Yes, and seems to resist throughout us, no matter how much God tries.
I love it. Yeah.
Okay, good. So we'll go to next text. And for this one, I'm going to broaden out from just a specific pasuk or verse of the Torah, but rather an entire book of the Torah, and that's Sefer Vayikra or the book of Leviticus, and something that I think, again, within Reform circles is often overlooked. In early classical Reform, there were synagogues that stopped reading the book of Leviticus altogether, just skipped over the entire thing. Much of Leviticus is spent in the operations of the priestly sacrifices, the temple, different remedies for different illnesses, impurities, and reads more like an ancient medical book. It reminds me of the old Saturday Night Live skit with Steve Martin, where he's bleeding everyone with leeches. And, if only, we used to think that there was a demon living in your belly, but now we know it's only the fact that, it's this and that. But I really, in studying the book of Vayikra, came to find it a revolutionary book in just how far ahead of its time it is. And that is that while ancient culture at the time very much associated illness, sickness, with a spiritual contamination, and therefore offered the remedy to the illness to punish, sometimes to kill, send into harem, send completely into isolation away someone who is sick. That Leviticus steps forward and says, sickness is something that happens to a person. It does not render them forever sick, or does not mean that God is judging them and choosing them to be sick. It just happens. It's scary. We need to create a way to quarantine them from the community so that the community will not be contaminated. But even more importantly, we have to create clear, transparent rituals to bring the person fully rehabilitated into the community. And I think that so often we live in, even in modern society, with the idea that when something bad happens to you, you must have done something wrong to deserve that. We have this idea of blaming the victim. And Leviticus makes a bold stand ahead of its time to say that we are not going to do that. Sometimes bad things just happen. We need to create standards to deal with them, but we have to preserve the sanctity and the holiness of that individual. And that's incredibly meaningful to me.
Except for when Leviticus does call people out for behavior and then punishes them for, accordingly. Which happens.
Give me examples.
Like, for instance, when someone gets leprosy, then it's associated later on what I'm going to bring here. But
yeah, but that's not in the Tanakh. That's Rashi later says that Miriam gets sara'at because of gossip, because of lashon hara. But that's
later. The association is made that she says the words that she says, and then she breaks out in sara'at, and it must be some kind of punishment for that. Like you're right. It's not like Doraita, it is Derabanan. Like
and it's a great point on that one. Miriam does not come down from her pedestal of being one of the holiest and leaders of the Jewish people when this happens. She continues, she gets rehabilitated in that sense. And maybe that's actually a really nice lesson for us about that we should have empathy for our leaders and watching leaders make mistakes, just like King David making a terrible mistake, and eventually then having a way to return. It's not as though again, I'll use this in sort of medieval medical terms. It's not as though she needs an exorcism. It's not that there's a demon living inside of her, that she's possessed by the devil. Right? It is that she made a mistake. In this case, that there is, whether it's causality or whether or not, that there is an outcome of a skin disease. It's one that is scary because, again, it is the lifeblood and the surface of the skin changing in a way it shouldn't. That is scary to the world of Leviticus, but then a fuller rehabilitation to the fact that when Miriam passes away in the next book, in Sefer Bamidbar, that there is mourning for her and the entire community stops and basically observes Shloshim for her in a way that we continue to do so even today.
I mean, it's interesting later on rabbinic texts, they are dealing with a lot of like the exorcism kind of stuff that's going on during that period of time. Like they do go back. What I really do like what you said about Vayikra, which is Leviticus, that is kind of, people are very uncomfortable with the structure of sacrifices, and that's how we're engaged with God. But it's beautiful that there is, and maybe going back to the theme that I'm a little bit fixated on, is that like looking for sanctity. How do you make holy relationships? And we have the structure that we're presented with like, how do you create order in society, and how do you create sanctity in society, and how do you create closeness with God? I'm very happy that the way that they practice closeness with God then is not the way that we do it today. Having said that, there's something really meaningful, I think, about you do something, this is how you repent for it. This is exactly what you have to do, and then let's move on. I mean, that there's something really to be said for very visceral and clear process. Whereas today we have a lot more hard work to do, but I think so much of our Judaism today is expanded upon like the framework of finding intimacy with God that we have in Leviticus.
Right. And I feel as though our society could use a bit more empathy towards the rehabilitation of those who have made great mistakes, or perhaps it's not even by their fault, have become contaminated in some way and now deserve our full inclusivity, welcoming, acceptance, and love. And that's what Leviticus teaches. And I think that is something that is often overlooked in a section of the Torah that is often associated with blood and guts, and sprinkle the bloods here and the entrails there and burn the suet fat on the altar. That if you read to the broader messages behind all of these ancient rituals, there is a intentional attempt to create a divide between one who suffers from maladies and someone who is sinful themselves.
Yeah, I think today you're right. It's a little bit blurry, and we put people on the altar today. We
love it. We love to build them up and tear them down and then build them back all over again. And if Britney Spears was living in the time of Leviticus, she would have been torn down and then rehabilitated, hopefully, and back down again. And it's sadly what our society chooses to do.
Yeah, how do we take messages from Leviticus and create more structure and bringing people back into our community? Like, what do we do?
I got a good one for this one.
Yeah. I'm ready.
I read this great article years back about the necessity in society to create outlets for violence, controlled amounts of violence, saying that in every society, that as part of the natural condition as human beings, we have a need, a thirst for some bits of violence and aggression. And if we do not allow those to come out, they will come out in natural ways of violence erupting in an uncontrolled way.
Yeah.
And so reading the book of Leviticus and sacrifices is to say that there is a controlled, sanctioned version of violence, almost to say, when we take the animal and kill it and watch it get burned, we realize that life is finite and that anything can burn and die, and we are made of ashes, and like that's really just us right there. But that in all societies, there is some level of sanctioned violence. I'll give you an example or two.
Yeah.
So easier when think of like the gladiators of Roman times and people coming getting their thrill from watching violence that way. modern day watching horror movies and thinking, oh my goodness, like I can for a second imagine that's me in the middle of Saw and thinking how I would get out of that. Watching the NFL and MMA and watching people, knock the snot out of each other on a regular basis. I'll go towards the other side and say, watching celebrities get torn down and Real Housewives and paparazzi and watching socially people get the snot beaten out of them and then built back up again, that societies have a general basic need all the way back from Leviticus, even beforehand, to ritualize, sanction controllable amounts of violence so it does not contaminate and go out throughout the rest of the community.
So you're saying that we need a temple-wide dodgeball game?
I don't know if that would go well for our personal well-being. Actually, no, I think that our society does not lack for controlled violence.
Yeah.
I think we're here more to create the standards and the inclusivity for healing. I think that anyone who goes out in modern world today, and of course I'm going to harp on the social evil that is social media, that we are awash in small levels of violence. And that, if anything, we have to create a community, an environment in which people can come in and feel as though they can relax and let their guard down. Because I think many of us walk around in society knowing that violence lurks behind many corners.
I always find it so interesting to see someone in person who I've seen like tear other people apart online. And you're like, how can you be the same human being in person and your virtual self? It's
right.
Yeah, we certainly need to get out certain elements of ourselves. Like going back to the Yaakov text, like he awakens from darkness. Like we all have darkness in us.
Right.
We all have that capacity, but how do we create an infrastructure where it stays safe and it's a productive part of society, not something that tears us apart?
I always have this small appetite, but not a large one. I can go onto Twitter. I don't tweet, but I subscribe to and I read Twitter. And for the first 5 minutes, it feels good. And sometimes it feels like thirsty for limited amounts of violence.
Mm-hmm.
And then after a certain time period, it doesn't feel good anymore. And I start to feel sick and I turn it off. And I have a limit to the levels of violence that I can tolerate, or that until I start to feel really like brought down by it.
Well, it's good that you have that, because a lot of people can keep going, and that's not scary.
Right. It's also a lot of our congregants, I'm speaking as a middle-aged man right now, violent video games I know are controversial at times, but I'm definitely of the viewpoint that for many people, it is a safe outlet for them to participate in controlled fake violence and not something that leads them to greater levels of violence in their lives. I know that that's it could be a whole separate topic if we want to talk about.
But going back for a second, and then I'll tie it into what I was going to be talking about for my second verse, is like there's something really intense and sacred and very existential about the fact that they made animal sacrifices. Like you have a sin, there's something that you've done wrong, you bring it to the priest, you make the offering, you see the animal die, the blood is drained. Like you're seeing the entire process of what it means to like end a life and what that is symbolic of in you. And I think today, without that, like without that system, and again, I'm not a proponent of bringing that back in any way. I'm just trying to see the beauty in something that existed. Like we are looking for blood sometimes, and that's we have to really. I think that's something that we need to be aware of.
And when we often look down at texts like Leviticus, it's a reminder that we're no better. And we do our own versions of ritualized violence, and we have the same basic needs as those back then. But now I've taken us to deep, dark places. Why don't you, for our last text here, inspire us, Rabbi?
Yeah, this is going to go a lot lighter. Maybe not. There's a text in Parshat Be'alotcha where it's also a very complicated interpersonal text where Miriam, Aaron, and Moshe are in the tent of meeting because God's called them in for this big family therapy session after two siblings are talking about the other sibling. That's not what I'm actually going to be speaking about, but that is kind of the pretext to this piece. in this parsha, they are talking about what happens if you have missed the Paschal offering.
Mm-hmm.
And what is the Paschal offering? It's really an incredible idea that as the people of Israel are leaving Egypt, they are instructed, they're commanded to make a Paschal offering, the Pesach offering, to remember this moment. So as you are leaving Egypt, you must make this offering, and it will go on forever and ever and ever. You must remember this moment. I think that's why we are still Jewish today, if we take our roots back to then, because we're very good at ritualizing memory and we don't allow ourselves to forget. And to the extent that if you forgot it, like it was a sin that you could be excommunicated for if you didn't make the Paschal offering. And so people come to Moshe and they say, "Hey Moshe, we couldn't make the Paschal offering because we were tamei, like we were impure." And why were they impure? Because they were probably dealing with dead bodies, like with people, with corpses, people who have died. And they go, "We need a solution because it's not our fault." And so Moses goes, "Just a second, I'm going to go talk to God." And he talks to God, and God's like, "Okay, well, we can have Pesach Sheni." And we don't have Pesach Sheni today. We do, like if you're in the Chabad Hasidic world, the Pesach Sheni is like the second Pesach. It's the second opportunity to make the offering. And who could make the offering? Someone who was tamei, someone who wasn't ready, who couldn't do it for whatever reason.
Right.
And the reason I love this is that it's a second chance holiday. And I've told you this before, but at my son's preschool, I I took him to school, and I hear on the walkie-talkies, and this is after Passover, I hear on the walkie-talkies, "We need another box of matzah downstairs." I was like, what? And I look at my calendar and I'm like, "Oh, it's Pesach Sheni today." And they were observing that, like the second opportunity to celebrate Passover, like you don't miss this opportunity. There's a question if you need to eat it with the matzah and the maror, because it's not the original offering. But I just love the idea of sometimes you don't get it right the first time.
Right.
And the people of Israel, they knew, like, we need this mechanism to get it right the second time because we didn't have the opportunity the first time. And the reason this is amazing to me for two reasons. Number one, it shows that Judaism, or the Hebrew religion, was coming together as it was going along. Like there was a problem, it needs fixing. And the second reason is that, like, we all go through moments where we just aren't ready to take on a mitzvah. We're not ready for whatever is being offered to us. All of us need second chances.
Right.
I sometimes need third chances.
Right.
And so, yeah, so I just find this to be really, really moving. And I think that it's also a great text to just put into our back pocket that, like, if you encounter something the first time and you don't feel like you did it right the first time, like, always ask if you can do it again, or always just do it again and then say sorry later.
What do your kids do with you when they ask you Ima, and then you say no when they ask you the time second, third, fourth, and fifth?
You mean the kid that asked if he could have chocolate while he had chocolate in his mouth?
So there are two things that I really love about this text as well. The first one is just as you're saying, that this shows that any sort of ritual practice, while it should have rules and should definitely have structure, also has to have flexibility to make it actually livable for its community. And there's so many ways in which Judaism over the year, the centuries, the millennia, has changed and shifted in order to be livable. The Torah says you shouldn't kindle a fire on Shabbat. That's great if you're living in the Middle East and it's a temperate climate, but if you're living in Romania, it's probably not so great. And be able to interpret and say, no, you can't start a fire actually, but you can keep the fire going, or you can cook in a low heat all of the time. That's making it livable. I remember during COVID reading, as one does on their free time, a bunch of Orthodox tshuvot about COVID, and someone writing in and saying, my loved one is about to die in the hospital. I can't see them face to face. Am I allowed to speak on a cell phone with them, even if it's Shabbat, if I'm saying goodbye? Right, like, that's a real question. Like, I know halachically I'm not supposed to use my phone, so like electricity on Shabbat, but this is an area of my only chance to say goodbye and be panim no panim, to be face to face with my loved one. Does that resort to the level of pikuach nefesh that I'm, saving a life, that I'm able to do so? That's this idea that you have to make it livable, breathable, and so much of, I think, what has shaped us as Jews, two things. One, It has to be flexible so people can live that way. And number two, living in under 2,000 years of diasporic experience, asking ourselves all the time, what will the neighbors say? And having to worry about not doing something so fanatical. We can give an entire separate one about maybe living in Israel today, where fanaticism now is able to arise when people don't have to say, what will the neighbors think, has its own identity formation. But the second thing I wanted to say, if I could, and I'm sorry if I'm going on too long, is that the parsha that you quote here, the psuk, speaks to an idea of God, which I think is revolutionary. That is that it's very easy to think of God in the Maimonides sort of form of an all-powerful, unchanging, all-knowing form, because anything else would be would then lack full power. And I think it was Heschel basically argues that to say that God is changeable is not to say that God is less powerful. If you make God unchangeable, God's just a robot. How's that like a sign of great power and wonder in the universe? That the Torah presents to us an idea of power, that power should be empathetic, listening, flexible. That doesn't take away from your power, that adds to your power. That is the ideal sense of power, is something that can handle questions, addendums, and can then speak to them without a sense of being threatened. I think it's a lovely idea, a lovely image of what power actually is.
I mean, I think that that's the power of Judaism. Like, we're adaptable. I mean, Judaism could have ended when the temple in Jerusalem was destroyed, but it adapted. And I don't know if it took this as its model, but all right, what's next? Like, how do we continue doing this within the framework that we have?
Right. I often like to teach about how Hanukkah is a holiday about fanatics who are saying that they don't want outside influences to Judaism. And the Maccabees are ready to kill anyone who would allow in Greek influences. And yet it is celebrated entirely through outside influences. It is the most oxymoronic holiday by playing Russian top games and eating Polish pancakes and giving American Christmas presents, in a holiday that began about not doing any of those things.
It was a second chance Sukkot.
There you go. Exactly. A second chance Sukkot, which later morphed into this, what is this holiday? And it is perhaps the greatest and best known example of how non-linear our practices are, and how Jewish practice adapts and changes to the needs of society. I forget the name of the Christian theologian who wrote that all liturgy is autobiography. And that when you read liturgy or you follow holidays, you're not learning so much about what God supposedly did or said, but not what God wanted to say, but what the people needed to hear.
Yeah, what was important to them at that moment.
And it continues for us today. And the way even that in our practices, and even post October the 7th, how different Jewish rituals and Jewish holidays have been affected reflects the ongoing adaptability, responsiveness of Jewish observance. Okay.
I think we've covered everything.
I think we've covered it. So we were going to talk about one or two books that we would suggest for those who want to continue with this. For mine, first of all, I love Rabbi Lawrence Kushner's books, God Was in This Place, and I Did Not Know It, which is about the idea of the sublimation of the ego to make space for God, according to the Jacob story that you spoke of. And I love the book Leviticus as Literature. Is a wonderful exploration of Leviticus from a historical literary perspective and understanding exactly how revolutionary the theology in it is. How about you?
I go back to every year as we get to Breshit, to Genesis, the beginning of Desire by Aviva Zornberg. Her midrashim are beautiful and really look at like the person and try to understand how we can relate to these characters and to the Torah from a really interpersonal and intimate perspective. And then a book that I've been starting to look at is It Takes Two to Torah, which is by Abigail Pogrebin. I cannot say her name correctly.
She spoke here a couple of years ago before you were here with her. Yeah, Pogrebin?
Pogrebin, thank you.
Sure.
And just her thing in general is like, how do you teach people to be in conversation with one another, and how do you teach people to understand one another's ideas? And so I love the idea here that Torah, as you're hearing between me and Rabbi Jaffe, is not one thing. It's many different ideas. It's to be expanded and to be thought of and to be debated about. And so I looked both of those books for those who are those who are looking to delve a little bit deeper into the stories and into how you study Torah.
Right. And for those listening here, the idea of starting a new cycle of Torah anew, and that each year the Torah remains the same, but we change and we find different things in it each time. Perhaps you want to consider making it a part of your own practice to look at that week's parsha, the week's Torah portion, and what sort of framing that offers for you for that week. And I think as we've tried to demonstrate here today, there are so many lessons to be gleaned from this, and look forward to continuing the conversation here at Bethel.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach.
Thanks for joining us on In Such a Time. Make sure to subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. To learn more about Rabbis Jonathan Jaffe and Leora Landi, or to connect with Temple Bethel of Northern Westchester, visit bethelnw.org, or follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Temple Bethel NW. Thanks for listening.